Over 100 dead and counting in Gaza as the Israeli premier vows to step up airstrikes across the coastal strip. Washington gives the Israelis the green light for a ground assault against Gaza as additional Israeli forces deploy along the border. Iraq's Kurdish political bloc halts its participation in the country's national government, further deepening the political paralysis. And at least 30 Ukrainian soldiers are killed in renewed clashes with pro-Russian rebels in the east of the country. Hello there, you're watching AEE World News and I'm Fatima Basim. For the fourth consecutive day, Israeli occupation forces are pounding the Gaza Strip with airstrikes, raising the death toll to more than 100. Israeli aggression on Gaza has claimed the lives of 101 Palestinians and injured more than 700 others. At least 11 Palestinians were killed on Friday and dozens wounded as Israeli air raids battered the besieged enclave. 5 Palestinians from the same family, including 1 woman and a child, were killed when Israeli warplanes shelled their house in Rafah. Many others have died of wounds they had sustained earlier. Zionist forces are indiscriminately targeting buildings across the Strip as they have already used 800 tons of explosives since the beginning of the offensive. Well, healthcare services in the besieged Gaza Strip are on the brink of collapse. Amid the growing number of injured civilians, the Strip is facing severe shortages of medical and fuel supplies.
As the Israelis intensify their bombing campaign on Gaza, healthcare services in the besieged Palestinian Strip are now on the brink of collapse, as medical supplies and fuel for hospital generators are starting to run dangerously low. So far, over 100 people have been killed and hundreds of others injured by Israeli strikes that have now entered a 4th day. A hospital, 3 clinics and a water desalination center have been damaged. The World Health Organization is warning that the Gaza healthcare services are unable to handle the wave of people requiring medical attention. The recent escalation of violence in the Gaza Strip raises concern about the ability of the government and the Ministry of Health of the occupied Palestinian territory to cope with the increased burden of medical emergencies on the health system, given the high levels of shortages of medicines, medical disposables, and hospital fuel supplies, and rising healthcare debt. The organization is calling on donors to contribute $40 million for essential healthcare supplies by the end of 2014 and another $20 million to repay the debt owed to East Al-Quds hospitals. In Gaza, the health ministry has only 10 days of fuel reserves for hospitals during frequent power cuts. Half of the state health workers have not received their salaries in recent months, and some can no longer afford to report for work, meaning that the humanitarian crisis looks set to worsen.
The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has not exactly been moved by the growing number of casualties. On the contrary, the Israeli leader defiantly said that no international pressure will prevent the Israelis from attacking Gaza. Netanyahu said Tel Aviv has gained its allies' full support to continue operations, with the US President Barack Obama expressing devotion to protect the Israeli entity. The Prime Minister warned that Israeli occupation forces are preparing all options, including a ground invasion in Gaza, as airstrikes will be intensified in the coming days.
We have struck over 1,000 targets in Gaza that belong to Hamas and Islamic Jihad. Israel's strikes in Gaza will continue until we are certain quiet has returned to the citizens of Israel. The leaders of Hamas are hiding behind the citizens of Gaza, and they are responsible for all casualties.
Well, the Israeli entity's staunchest ally, the US, has indeed voiced its full backing for a ground military incursion against Gaza. Washington's ambassador to Tel Aviv, Dan Shapiro, has said that his country will support the Israelis if they choose to launch a ground assault against the Gaza Strip. Israeli troops have been heavily deployed along the barrier surrounding Gaza and are on high alert. The Israelis have also mobilized around 20,000 army reservists out of a total allotment of 40,000, which was authorized by the Israeli cabinet earlier this week. The UN, for its part, has expressed concerns that Israeli-perpetrated attacks against Gaza could be a violation of laws of war. The United Nations Human Rights Office said that reports on Israeli strikes carried out against Gaza could amount to a breach of international human rights laws.
They're paralyzed by fear. We have several dozens of civilians who have been killed. We have hundreds of people who have been injured. We have more than 300 housing units which have been destroyed, either partially or completely. That has meant that 2,000 people are displaced inside the small Gaza Strip, which is already extremely densely populated.
Earlier, Joe Catron, a human rights activist, told Al Ittijah that an Israeli ground incursion against the Gaza Strip is unlikely at this point, given the magnitude of resistance they are being met with.
It reminds me very much of 2012, the last major Israeli military offensive against the Gaza Strip. In November of that year, they again repeated, again and again, these hints and innuendos about an imminent invasion of the Gaza Strip, which many people believed. And of course, it never happened then. And I see little reason to believe that it's going to happen now. I think there are a couple of factors that would discourage the possibility of an Israeli ground invasion. The first of these is, of course, the resistance. The Israelis know that they would face considerable. It would be very difficult for them, let us say that. And the other aggravating factor is that it's not at all clear that it fits into Israel's political designs to have control of the Gaza Strip. Of course, there are senior Israeli political figures like Lieberman who are in favor of reoccupying the Gaza Strip. Netanyahu clearly is not. He does not want responsibility for it. That's not a part of his plan. The Israeli crackdown in the West Bank and the current military offensive in Gaza are connected, of course. Israel's attacks in the West Bank had 3 goals, so they told us. They said that their objectives were to recover 3 settlers who had gone missing, to disrupt the Palestinian reconciliation agreement, and to deal a blow to the Palestinian resistance factions, primarily Hamas. We know now, due to information that's been released, that they knew the whole time the 3 settlers were most likely dead. So with the latter 2 objectives are the only ones we really need to take seriously. In the case of the Gaza Strip, it was certainly connected to Israel's aggression in the West Bank, but I think the connection may have been more on the Palestinian side than on the Israeli one. The Palestinians of Gaza saw Israel's ongoing aggression, its mass detentions, raids, and killings in the West Bank, and they responded, they reacted. They took steps to defend Palestine, and that's what has brought us to where we are now. I don't know that it's necessarily true that both scenarios, although they are connected, were part of the same Israeli design. I think the first one is certainly something that Netanyahu had in mind and would have actively favored more than the second.
Meanwhile, the Palestinian resistance is fighting back against Israeli aggression by firing barrages of rockets on Israeli settlements. Palestinian resistance groups have responded to Israeli attacks with nearly 100 rockets that landed in southern Israeli settlements. Meanwhile, several rockets hit Tel Aviv and Gush Dan as the Al-Qassam brigades, the military wing of Hamas, targeted Ben Gurion Airport with M75 rockets. Sirens were heard in various settlements, including Ashkelon, Ashkol and Ashdod, which was hit by 9 rockets, some of which destroyed a gas station and injured settlers. The Palestinian groups also fired an anti-tank missile at occupation forces north of the Strip, injuring 3 Israeli soldiers. Let's now cross over to Balsam Al-Atrash, our correspondent in Gaza. Balsam, give us a sense of what the situation is like in Gaza at the moment.
The past hour here in Gaza had witnessed heavy airstrikes all over the Gaza Strip, Rafah City, Khan Yunis, Eastern Khan Yunis, Al-Garara, Deir al-Balah, the central province of Gaza Strip, Gaza the city, the northern Gaza Strip, all have witnessed targets within the past hour. And about half an hour ago, within minutes, 6 houses were targeted and fully destroyed in the area of Deir al-Balah. Also, a college in Deir al-Balah was targeted as well with 2 missiles. The warplanes also targeted 4 houses, which left around 6 families homeless. Also, 16 Palestinians have been killed in the Israeli airstrikes since midnight Friday, rising the death toll to over 106 and over 650 wounded. The latest airstrikes and shellings targeted the Nazaz neighborhood in Al-Shajaiya in the eastern Gaza city, which killed 2 Palestinians. Also, the warplanes targeted worshippers who were leaving a mosque in the Zaytun neighborhood, leaving 7 wounded. Currently, the Israeli occupation warplanes are roaming the skies and have just hit an open area in Deir al-Balah, land of Abu Janneza, leaving 2 Palestinians killed and more than 13 wounded. 10 of them are from children under 10 years old. Gaza's hospitals have just now released a statement saying that they have been operating with severely depleted supplies. 28% of the essential drug items are in lack and 54% of the disposables currently out of stock. The situation is going towards a humanitarian crisis and a complete collapse in the hospital if no intervene occurs.
All right, Balsam Al-Atrash, thank you for those updates. The Israeli aggression against the Gaza Strip has caused an uproar across the Muslim world. Thousands have taken to the streets to stage rallies in solidarity with Palestinians and call for an end to the bloodshed.
Aggravated by the ongoing Israeli aggression in the Gaza Strip, thousands of people across the Muslim world took to the streets in solidarity with Palestinians. The capital cities of Jordan, Tunisia, Egypt, Indonesia, and France, among others, were the site of pro-Palestinian rallies. Flying Palestinian flags and different banners condemning the heinous crimes perpetrated by the Israelis were common in every protest.
We are here to support the Palestinian cause. We are here in solidarity with our brothers and sisters in the Gaza Strip who are dying every day. The least we can do is support them with our words.
Basically, we're here today because of what everyone knows has been happening in Palestine for the past few days. People have been dying, many have been killed, over 90 have been killed. And while we've been here to say what we've been trying to say for the past 70 years or so, Israel has no place to be there.
For many, the bloodletting in Palestine will water the revolution against the occupiers and probably spread out to the entire region.
We have come to protest for Gaza's victory, in defense of Gaza and for our children in Gaza. We are protesting here to send them a strong message that we are with them, in our prayers and our thoughts, for the victory of the people of Palestine. We are all Gaza.
Yet the doors of victory seem to be a long way off, as Arab leaders, save for a minority, have either turned a blind eye to Israeli aggression or flooded the enclave with billions of dollars in aid in the hope that it will suffice, as opposed to standing up to the Zionist entity.
A suicide car bombing and a roadside bomb killed 13 people and wounded 21 others in the disputed northern city of Kirkuk. Among the victims of the twin blasts at the city's southern entrance were 4 women, 2 children and 2 policemen. While Iraq's top Shia cleric Grand Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Sistani called on the bitterly divided politicians in Iraq to unite and put an end to what he called radical discourse. In a sermon delivered by his aide, Sheikh Abdul Mahdi al-Karbala'i, he also urged fighters to respect the rights of all Iraqis regardless of sect or politics, after an escalation in apparent sectarian killings in recent weeks. Tens of thousands of Iraqis responded to a call from Sistani to take up arms against a militant insurgency.
We are in a dire need to close ranks and renounce divisions and disagreement. From here, we have repeatedly urged politicians and those who speak in the media to refrain from radical discourse. We would like to stress to all our armed forces and those volunteers who have joined them, whom we hailed for their bravery and courage in defending their country, people and sanctity, the necessity of strict and full commitment in taking care of the rights of all the people and not transgress against any innocent citizen, no matter their sectarian or ethnic affiliation or whatever their political stance.
Of deteriorating relations between the two sides, the Kurdish political bloc has suspended all participation in Iraq's national government over Prime Minister Nouri al-Malki's comments that Kurds were hosting armed militants in Erbil. On Friday, Iraq's Foreign Minister Hoshyal Zebari announced that Kurdish politicians would stop running their ministries. He added, however, that Kurdish MPs would continue to attend parliamentary sessions, saying that the country risked falling apart if an inclusive government was not formed. In response to this latest move by the Kurds, Maliki announced he was appointing a temporary replacement for the foreign minister, replacing him with principled intellectual and physicist Hossein Shahristani. Our correspondent Wissam al-Bayati is in the capital of the Kurdish Autonomous Region and he sent us this report.
Once again, Kurdistan is attempting to weaken the central government to take more political and territorial advantages in northern region. As the Iraqi army is conducting a wide range of military operations in different parts of the country, the Kurdistan regional government has decided to boycott the cabinet's meetings in an attempt to put more pressures on the central government to give the green light for Kurdistan to include the oil-rich city of Kirkuk to its territories. The boycotting decision came in response to the recent accusations of the Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki, who said that Erbil province has turned into a sanctuary for the terrorists and is harboring the Baathists and ISIS leaders. The tensions have increased after the Kurdish forces imposed its full control on the oil-rich city of Kirkuk after the withdrawal of the Iraqi army from the province under the pretext of protecting the civilians. A few days after, the KRG president Masoud Barzani has announced that Kurdistan will hold a referendum about Kirkuk to be included to Kurdistan, a step is strongly opposed by Baghdad. The Kurdish lawmakers said that the government has failed in implementing the Article 140 of the Iraqi constitution regarding the so-called disputed areas, including Kirkuk.
Establishing the Kurdish state is the first Kurdish dream, and today Kurdistan has all the requirements to become an independent state, especially after regaining Kirkuk from the central government, as it was the key element for the independence of Kurdistan.
After the U.S. invasion in 2003, the Kurdish officials have intensified their efforts on changing the population demography in Kirkuk province by forcing the Arabs to flee the city and send more Kurdish families to the city to increase the Kurdish population and give the city a Kurdish identity. However, many other Kurdish officials agree that the withdrawal of Peshmerga from Kirkuk is directly linked to the implementation of the Article 140 in the constitution.
نحن نؤمن بمادة 140.
Without the implementation of Article 140, especially in Kirkuk, the Peshmerga will not retreat. The Baghdad government should realize that Kirkuk is a Kurdish province.
The Kurdish forces have fortified their posts in Kirkuk, and according to the local authorities in the province, the presence of the Peshmerga in the province is strongly required for good.
The Kurdish officials have agreed that they are not afraid of Baghdad's threats against Kurdistan, stressing that the Peshmerga will be well prepared if any military action were taken by the central government. Wissam al-Biati, Al-Ittijah, Arbil.
Let's now speak to political analyst Intifad Kambar, who joins us now from our Beirut studios. Mr. Kambar, what role is Arbil playing in the conflict when it goes and seizes oil fields or claims Kirkuk?
Well, this conflict between the central government and the Kurdish regional government must end very quickly. We have a priority in fighting ISIS as we speak now. ISIS is in control of 60% or more of Iraqi land, and this plague or this cancer must be uprooted very quickly by reconciliation for all Iraqis who are willing to fight terrorism. The Article 140 on the disputed areas is mentioned in the Constitution, and this has to be resolved through political means and rhetoric that will give benefit to ISIS or to terrorists in Iraq must stop, and divisions must stop immediately.
Are Prime Minister Maliki's accusations that Erbil has been hosting militants completely baseless? Let's not forget the KRG has working relations with Tel Aviv, also an enemy of Baghdad.
Well, the Kurdish government has been very determined in fighting terrorism, and ISIS, we have to remember, is endangering the Kurdish region also. I think ISIS is very much willing to attack the Kurdish region, and I think the Kurdish Peshmerga have fought ISIS on every front possible, such as in Jalawla and Kirkuk. However, our enemy are not the Kurdish government. Our enemy is Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi and ISIS.
Yes, and do you think that Peshmerga forces will be fighting Iraqi forces to achieve this Kurdish state? We've heard a lot of rhetoric, negative rhetoric coming out of the KRG, and we know that they will be holding a referendum soon.
I don't think such a military confrontation, God forbidden, will ever happen. In fact, the Iraqi military is both hands full with the huge undertaking that they have to do in fighting ISIS and liberating areas occupied by ISIS, such as I said, vast areas such as Salah ad-Din, part of Anbar, the border with the Iraq, Jordan and Syria, and Mosul. And I think, I hope, and I hope this confrontation will happen, and I totally think it will not happen. And I totally think the time has come, after this escalation, the time has come for reconciliation both with the Kurds and the Sunnis.
Let's talk about the suspension of Kurdish political blocs from the government. Are they trying to exert pressure to get their own way, possibly independence, or more influence or power in the central government in Baghdad?
Well, they definitely, after the comments that Mr. Maliki made against the Kurdish government and Kurdistan, there has to be some sort of a response by the Kurdish government, and I think this is expected. I hope this escalation will stop, and it does not go any further limits. And I think we have to always remember that the Kurdish people and the Kurdistan area was the base for Iraqi resistance to the Ba'ath regime and Saddam for decades, and we are partners in the struggle together, in which we were able to remove Saddam from power. And I think we have a good history of mutual understanding and work, and we have to continue on that heritage rather than create differences.
All right, political analyst Intifad Kambar, thank you for sharing your thoughts on this.
Thank you.
Staying in Iraq now, where there are only days to go before Iraqi lawmakers meet for another parliamentary session over the formation of a new government. But as Rihab al-Rikabi reports, there is still a lot of negotiating to be done before the country's top posts are filled.
Negotiations over the formation of the new Iraqi government are continued, yet with no agreement in sight among the political factions on the country's three key leadership positions: President, Parliament Speaker and Prime Minister, and the distribution of ministerial posts. Many blame the Sunni politicians for the talks' stalemate as they request more posts in the next government besides the Parliament Speaker's chair. Yet, observers argue that there are deep disagreements among the Sunni blocs and they have lost ground after the latest militant offensive led by Wahhabi Islamic State militants.
The Sunni blocs are now pushing for the two presidential slots, the ceremonial president and speaker of legislature, but Sunni politicians are now facing tough time after the ongoing crisis and the recent establishment of the Islamic State in Mosul, plus the heavy presence of extremist militants in Sunni majority provinces. That makes it impossible for them to go on with negotiations.
According to lately leaked information, Sunni lawmakers are demanding more Sunni representation in government institutions and more integration of Sunnis into the political process over the relinquishment of a Sunni federal region, which many think has pushed Iraq's outgoing parliament speaker Osama Najafi to withdraw his candidacy for a new term in his post, with the aim to preside the premeditated Sunni regional government that Qatar, Saudi Arabia and Turkey strongly back.
Sunni politicians will act as one-hand coalition in the face of Kurdish Alliance and the Iraqi National Alliance and its small allies, and their demands will not be limited to the post of Parliament Speaker, but they will go for more revenues for their community.
Up to now, the preliminary indications suggest that the continued meetings between the National Alliance members will soon come out with the name of a new Prime Minister to replace Iraq's caretaker Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki, who intensely rejects all pressure to give up his candidacy for premiership. The Kurds as well, who maintain the president's position, will present a successor to the ailing caretaker president of Iraq, Jalal Talabani, in the next government. Rihab al-Rikabi, Al-Ittijah, Baghdad.
Turkey has adopted a bill to revive peace talks with the Kurdistan Workers' Party, which has been designated a terrorist organization by Ankara. The imprisoned leader of the PKK, Abdullah Öcalan, welcomed the move, dubbing it a historic development, and urged for the law to be implemented quickly. The move is believed to be a bid by Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan to rally Kurdish votes ahead of next month's presidential elections. You're watching Al-Ittijah World News, still to come. The US Secretary of State visits Afghanistan, urging rival political groups to audit the disputed presidential vote. Welcome back to AEE TV World News. Here's a reminder of our top stories. Over 100 dead and counting in Gaza as the Israeli premier vows to step up airstrikes across the coastal strip. Washington gives the Israelis the green light for a ground assault against Gaza as additional Israeli forces deploy along the border. Iraq's Kurdish political bloc halts its participation in the country's national government, further deepening the political paralysis. And at least 30 Ukrainian soldiers are killed in renewed clashes with pro-Russian rebels in the east of the country. Russia is trying for the third time to get the UN Security Council to demand a ceasefire in eastern Ukraine, where government forces have launched an offensive against pro-Russian separatists. Russia's UN ambassador Vitaly Turkin warned that if the situation is allowed to get out of hand, it would really have a dramatic and tragic consequence.
Twice in the past few weeks, we put two draft resolutions of the Security Council on the table, which were stonewalled by our Western colleagues, but we believe that we need to keep trying, and we hope that it will become clear, after all, to our partners in the Security Council, all members of the Security Council, that we should not allow the situation in the east of Ukraine to get out of hand, because it would have really dramatic, tragic consequences for the people in that part of Ukraine, but also, we believe, for entire country, neighboring country of Ukraine.
Well, Ukraine has warned that its all-out assault on pro-Russian separatists may last another month, rejecting international calls for a ceasefire. This as a rebel attack with Grad missiles on a Ukrainian post on the border with Russia may have killed as many as 30 soldiers and border guards.
Ukrainian assault helicopters and warplanes, along with tanks and armored vehicles, are gearing up for an assault on the eastern rebel stronghold of Donetsk. The million-strong city, to which most of the rebels have retreated to since the weekend, is bracing for the final face-off with echoes of artillery and gunshot heard from distance.
We are defending our motherland, and we don't want some Western people to come here and rule over us. We just won't simply allow this. There are a lot of miners here, a lot of builders, ordinary people.
This is our land. We are not touching them. It is them who are coming. We want a peaceful life. We don't need them coming here and bombing us. That's why we are here.
In an unexpected turn of events, a rebel attack with Grad missiles on a Ukrainian post on the border with Russia killed as many as 30 soldiers. If this is confirmed, this would amount to the deadliest rebel attack on government forces since the Ukrainian military ended a unilateral ceasefire on June 30th.
What we have at the moment is information from open sources. It says that up to 30 Ukrainian soldiers were killed. There may be more victims since they shot Ukrainian soldiers using Grad missile systems. Damage caused there is enormous.
Meanwhile, Ukrainian troops have been digging trenches, setting up tents and testing military vehicles at a new camp on the road between Konstantinivka and Donetsk.
I'm ready to fight till the end along with my friends in order for all this to come to an end as soon as possible, so that my nephews could walk through this land without trouble and all other people as well. Of course, I want to go home, that's it.
Ukrainian forces regained more ground but sustained further casualties on Thursday in clashes with separatists. Kiev confirmed the death of 5 more soldiers in rebel attacks that have already killed more than 200 troops. For now, though, it appears that the standoff is looming in Donetsk, where residents fear more artillery and aerial bombing, as President Petro Poroshenko vowed to eliminate rebel strongholds in the east by the end of the month.
Meanwhile, a new report by Amnesty International has revealed an even darker side to the ongoing violence in eastern Ukraine. The report highlighted the hundreds of abductions and incidents of torture, while criticizing the use of excessive force by government forces.
As in any conflict, the civilians always end up paying the highest price. In Ukraine, it's not only the shelling and daily fighting that civilians suffer from. Amnesty International has published a stomach-turning report which highlights cases of abductions, beatings and torture of activists, protesters and journalists in the east of Ukraine over the last 3 months. In addition, Amnesty highlighted the unlawful detentions by Ukrainian government forces. The report focused on video footage from May showing Ukrainian parliamentarian Oleg Lyashko, along with several armed men, interrogating 2 pro-Russian leaders. The footage showed both captives blindfolded and bleeding.
We've looked at the conduct of the conflict by the Ukrainian forces and the anti-Kiev separatist armed groups. And we've seen abductions by both sides. We've seen torture of people who've been abducted by the separatist armed groups. And we've also seen, we're very concerned about the level of civilian casualties during the conflict as a result of bombardment, mortar fire by the Ukrainian forces.
The Ukrainian army has been fighting pro-Russian separatists in the majority Russian-speaking east since April, and hundreds of civilians and armed militants have been killed.
We have a great concern about the fact that it's the ordinary people that always suffer in these situations, and we're seeing the ordinary people here suffering. Those who simply wanted to express an opinion, who became known for their opinions, are being targeted for these violations.
Amnesty says that while there are no definitive figures on the number of abductions, nearly 500 cases have been reported between April and June 2014, further highlighting the need for a solution in the troubled east of the country.
US-German relations were dealt a heavy blow after Berlin expelled the CIA station chief in the country over a worsening spy scandal. The expulsion comes after 2 suspected US spy cases were uncovered in less than a week in Germany. The revelations came just a week after the 2 allies had launched a diplomatic initiative to overcome the NSA surveillance scandal. Berlin's step is said to be highly unusual among NATO allies and highlights the worst Berlin-Washington fallout since the US occupation of Iraq in 2003.
The representative of the U.S. intelligence services at the Embassy of the United States of America has been told to leave Germany. The government takes these developments very seriously.
Our decision to ask the current representative of the US intelligence services to leave Germany is the right decision, a necessary step and a fitting reaction to the break of trust which has occurred. Taking action was unavoidable in my opinion.
Amid political turmoil sparked by Afghanistan's disputed presidential election results, US Secretary of State John Kerry made a surprise visit to the Afghan capital, Kabul, to express US concerns and urge a resolution that would pave the way for a government willing to cooperate with Washington.
Afghanis have been hoping that the presidential elections would produce a democratic transfer of power in their troubled country. However, the relative success of 2 rounds of voting was marred by a post-election standoff that is threatening to plunge the country into political chaos. Former Foreign Minister Abdullah's camp has already rejected the outcome of the polls, claiming that fraud and vote rigging have given ex-World Bank economist Ashraf Ghani the edge in the second round. Preliminary results indicated that Abdullah garnered 43% of the votes. The dispute has sent alarm bells ringing in Washington. US Secretary of State John Kerry flew to Kabul with the aim to bring both sides closer to a settlement. Kerry held talks with Ghani, who said he would agree to an intensive audit of votes to ensure the legitimacy of the poll results.
We obviously have high hopes that the questions about the election will be resolved quickly, can be resolved, and that a way forward can take place which can give Afghans confidence that they have a presidency and a government that is capable of unifying all Afghans.
Our commitment is to ensure that the election process enjoys the integrity and the legitimacy that the people of Afghanistan and the world would believe in. Therefore, we believe in the most intensive and extensive audit possible to restore faith.
Kerry's next meeting with Abdullah is expected to tackle the core of the issue. The US diplomat will send out a clear message that Afghanistan risks losing American support if anyone attempts to seize power by extra-legal means. Afghanistan's final presidential election results are due to be announced on July 22nd, and if no solution is found before that date, observers believe the war-torn country may descend into further violence ahead of the withdrawal of foreign troops by the end of the year.
Well, religious leaders in Britain from the two leading Islamic sects are declaring a unified stance against militants belonging to the so-called Islamic State. The Sunni and Shia leaders condemned the destruction of holy shrines across Iraq and the rest of the Middle East, with over 500 organizations signing up to condemn the violence perpetrated by the militant group. Mohsen Abbas has more.
There was, at the time of
a Sunni-Shia interfaith unity declaration was made in the House of Commons by representatives of over 500 Muslim community organizations in Britain. Jewish, Christian and other faith communities also endorsed the statement against the destruction of holy sites at a big iftar event, part of a British government initiative to use Ramadan as a platform for promoting interfaith understanding.
The following Muslim leaders from all denominations and schools of thought hereby declare the shrines of Karbala and Rajab are sacred to all Muslims. Both Imam Ali and Imam Hussein are revered as important figures in Islam. Millions of Muslims visit the shrines every year from many different countries and all Muslim denominations. We vehemently condemn such threats that are abhorrent to all Islamic values and principles and cannot be considered as representative of any denomination within Islam.
The failure of David Cameron to take a robust stand against ISIS's invasion yet again calls into question the intentions of Western powers and leaves them open to allegations of double standards. The growing suspicion is that Sunni-Shia division and a three-state breakup of Iraq are the objectives of the West itself.
I was against invasion of Iraq. I think it was wrong, because what it has done is created a rift between the Shias and Sunnis. And I'm very, very concerned that this rift, in fact, is being perpetrated in other parts of the Middle East. Indeed, I think we should all rise and condemn any form of violence.
I would say stop playing double standard and stop saying that everything to do with Al-Qaeda is a terrorist outside the Middle East, but inside Iraq or inside Syria, you turn the blind eye. You must act and stop the money flowing to these people to cause more destruction. The West is not doing enough to send us enough messages to say that they are not supporting those groups.
British faith leaders are playing a crucial role in questioning the unethical nature of Western foreign policy and are urging the British Foreign Office to put aside geopolitical and economic interests for once and to prioritise human rights and justice instead.
The Big Iftar event here in London demonstrates that Muslims are united in their condemnation of ISIS. The declaration today, signed both by Sunnis and Shias here in London, has clearly given a message to those people who are perpetrating violence that actually the shrines in Iraq are to be protected by Muslims across the world. Mohsen Abbas, AEE TV, London.
The Bahraini regime has officially charged the leader of the biggest opposition movement in the country for holding a meeting with a US diplomat earlier this week. This as hundreds of protesters took to the streets of the tiny Persian Gulf Kingdom amid an ongoing heavy-handed crackdown by the Al Khalifa monarchy.
In yet another heavy-handed approach against the pro-democracy opposition, the Bahraini government has charged the Al-Wifaq party leader Sheikh Ali Salman and his political assistant Khalil al-Marzouk after the two met U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Democracy, Human Rights and Labor Tom Malinowski. The decision, according to Manama, was taken because the senior leaders did not obtain permission ahead of the meeting. Al-Wifaq slammed the unfair charges, saying such regulations had never been implemented before and no one had been prosecuted on such charges. Bahrain expelled Malinowski earlier this week, accusing the U.S. diplomat of intervening flagrantly in the country's internal affairs by holding the meeting. Washington, for its part, has said it is deeply concerned about the treatment and is considering a response.
Spoken in recent days with.
The latest move highlights the increasing sensitive relations between the strategic allies. Bahrain has been facing harsh criticism over its appalling human rights record and violations against pro-democracy protesters who are continuing with their 3-year uprising. The political crackdown coincided with renewed oppression on the streets. Rallies were held in the northeastern island of Sitra, as well as the village of Deraz, with demonstrators calling for freedom and the fall of the regime. Simultaneous protests were also staged in the village of Sanabis near the capital Manama. Protesters denounced the killing of fellow demonstrator Abdulaziz Al-Abbar, whose body was withheld by authorities after his death. Nearly daily confrontations occur between Bahraini security forces and protesters who have taken up the task of fighting for their rights and freedoms in a country where authorities often use force to muffle the voice of the opposition.
Here's a recap of our top stories. Over 100 dead and counting in Gaza as the Israeli premier vows to step up to airstrikes across the coastal strip. Washington gives the Israelis the green light for a ground assault against Gaza as additional Israeli forces deploy along the border. Iraq's Kurdish political bloc halts its participation in the country's national government, further deepening the political paralysis. And at least 30 Ukrainian soldiers are killed in renewed clashes with pro-Russian rebels in the east of the country. Me and the Al Hijah News team, thank you for watching and good night.